Hey everybody, welcome back to season 4 of Road to the Trials. I am here with my season-long co-hosts Peter Bromka and Lindsey Hein, and here on the podcast today, we have famed, legendary coach James McKirdy. We can say that now, James. You got gray on the beard. You've been around for a while. You're no longer an upstart in the game. So thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciate the time. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, you are a good friend of mine and someone who I've known for a long time. And you have also coached a lot of runners and worked with coaches who have coached a lot of runners who have gone to the trials. Do you have a working number that you have? I know you're like the king of metrics. So I know that you have a lot of numbers. You like, maybe it stems from your baseball card collections back when you were, a preteen, but you're always throwing out stats and numbers at me. Do you have any OTQ related metrics off the dome?
Yeah. Like, it's something that we keep track of just because it's good to know where we've come from. So in 2016, we didn't have any OTQs at all. I just started the business 3 months prior. And then in 2020, we had 24 OTQs. And then in 2020, we had 14. So we're at 38 OTQs on the roads. We had a few on the track along the way. So I think in terms of total Olympic trials, we're well over that 40 mark, closer to 45.
I recall in Orlando, you had this iconic shirt that all the athletes had. It's part of your branding. And so I saw them running down the street and I was like, what is that pack of people? Like, they all are obviously fit, but then I kind of ran that direction.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I see what's going on. This is cool.
Yeah, that wasn't like specifically for the OTQ. That was, at the time, that was our singlet. And it was a castle. It kind of represented Edinburgh Castle. And it was rivers underneath that represented the River Tweed, where my grandmother's history is from in Scotland. And so we wanted, male and female. If you had if you were a female, you had a female runner. If you were a male, you had a male runner. And that was the same singlet that everybody in the business had. Our most recent one is a little bit more of a design like this. And then we have a new one coming that is a little bit more personal to my family as well. That should be launched now, actually. So, yeah.
Marathon season. Here we go.
Fall marathon
Speaking
season.
of which,
yeah,
Berlin yesterday.
I know.
Oh, man. Well, I'm just already preempting Matt. What is it like for you for the fall like, where does your mind go when the fall marathon season kicks off? I'm sure there's a million things happening at once, but where does your mind go?
For me, everybody's putting so much pressure on themselves to find success. Specifically, if we're talking about the road to the trials, the window's open as of September 1st, right? It was a little interesting because Brian Schrader ran a marathon on August 31st in Sydney, and he ran 2:10, ran 12th at the Sydney Marathon. And I think when the USATF trials committee, road committee, was talking about, when's the window going to open, Sydney wasn't announced as a major at that point. So, like, we missed it by like 24 hours. And then, okay, well, I don't think he's going to have a problem qualifying. He just ran 2:10, 12th and made on a really hard course. He's going to be fine. He's not missing out by not being our first qualifier. But now that the window's open September 1st, there's this new concept of paying attention to the results and paying attention to who's qualifying. Like, I was up watching it, and I think, as I was, tracking Nick and tracking Katja Golding from here in Flagstaff as she was racing, I'm thinking to myself, okay, we might have 2 or 3 qualifiers from this race in really bad weather. So I was getting excited just about that. Like, okay, like, we already know the World Championship qualifiers or team are the first real qualifiers. They have a bunch of stuff, but like you quoted, tweeted out, or maybe you shared on Instagram, we have our first time qualifiers from Berlin. And it's an exciting, okay, here we go. The window is open and now people are qualifying. And to see Nick Hager, who struggled for years with performance, run an incredible race of 2:11 and change, just a bit under 2:12. To see Mulder run 2:15 with a negative split in really shit weather, pardon my French. It was really cool to see that take place. Unfortunately, Katja didn't have the race I think she dreamed of, and she missed the qualifying standard. Not that I don't think that was her goal. She was going out there to run her best race to the best of her ability. ability. And I think she's going to be fine. Like, she's a 2:30 marathoner, I think maybe 2:29 marathoner. I don't think she's going to have an issue. But it would have been nice to not have that for her, I imagine, just to get the monkey off the back and make sure she's in, if that is indeed her goal.
So, okay, let's talk about when an athlete comes to you and says, hey, my dream is to qualify for the Olympic trials. Right now we have this window that we've talked about. Let's just do a little case study here. Say their marathon PR is like 2:48 and they've got 2.5 years to get that time down to make that qualifying time. Where do you even begin with an athlete when they come to you with this predicament?
Hold on. Is this 2:48 a female runner or a male runner?
Sorry. I mean, if I'm talking, I'm talking about a female.
It's a fair question. It's
I'm just kidding, but no,
yeah.
I am talking about a female. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, male. Peter, correct me if I should say this number differently. Say the male number is 2:21.
Sure.
Is that
Let's go with it.
equivalent?
Yeah. It's
Do some calculating in the background.
I get these questions. Hey, I'm a 2:28 marathoner and I wanna get down to under 2:16. Hey, I just ran 2:50, and over the last year I'm gonna qualify for the OTQ. You know, it becomes a very personalized response based off of the individual. I don't believe that there is a systematic approach. This is how you have to train. This is what you need to do. I believe, from a coaching point of view, that we have to take the history of the athlete in terms of injury history, health history, what they're doing for work and life and family, all the responsibilities that they have. Maybe this individual ran 2:50 off of 4 days a week of running, and the ceiling is maxed out well beyond our belief in what it is they could have done off of just 4 days a week of running. What happens if they can run 6 or 7 days a week over the course of 2 or 3 years? Maybe it's a 2:21 marathoner on the male side who started off at 3:20 and got down to 2:21. Peter, what was your marathon when you first started?
Well, the marathon is difficult, if you recall. And so I ran 3:08 in Boston as a charity runner and didn't take in very many calories, and distinctly remember that feeling of the bonk when you're out of calories. So yeah, it's funny. I do think there are performances relative to that specific race, and then most runners, depending on their background, have come from running other races. So I found a thread about me online somewhere where someone was like, oh man, Bromka went from 3:08 to 2:19. And then someone wisely was like, yeah, but I looked up his college results and they weren't anything like crazy, but they were more in line with
being able to run 2:19.
At least being able to run, like in the 2:30s, let's say, for where I think I trained better in my 30s than I did in my early 20s for sure. So it's good for people to check in with what have they done well, what have they not done well. There's so many pillars to this type of performance.
Yeah, there is. I do believe there's a gap. I just don't know what that gap really is. Just because somebody didn't run in college doesn't mean that they're not capable of qualifying for the Olympic trials on the women's side and on the men's side. I do believe that 2:16, 2:37 is a little bit closer in comparability. World Athletics believes that too because of their scoring tables. They're really kind of in line with each other in terms of world rankings. That also fits. But I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, you're a 2:35 male marathoner. You have no shot in the next 2.5 years, because I don't know. I have no idea. But I'd like to find out. So one of the things that I would do is, okay, we know what the goal is. What's missing? And how do we attack what's missing? Oftentimes, it's going to be 5K, 10K power and development on that side, because they've been running marathon after marathon after marathon. And they started to see development, and then they just stopped, and they forgot about other aspects of fitness.
So James, Matt, going back to Lindsey's point, Lindsey's question, just as a rejoinder onto that, what are some, say you're on an intake call with someone, they bring up that is the goal. what are the series of questions that you're asking next to kind of put that goal into context?
Actually, one of the things that I will ask is, when's the last time you didn't train for a marathon? When's the last time you focused on something other than that goal and developed your 5K, your 10K, maybe even up to your half marathon? When was that the actual purpose and sole focus of your training for a 6 to 9 month period? Because if they can answer that question and, oh, I've never really done that before, all I ever did was marathoning, well, then my brain goes into solution mode. Well, this is an aspect of fitness that we can develop to allow you to rise in your marathoning. Right? If they say, oh, I've never run a marathon before. All I've been doing is 5K, 10K stuff, and this is going to be my debut, or I've only done this type of work. I've only done it one time, and my volume of running is pretty low. Well, then my brain goes into, okay, well, maybe we need to start focusing on development of aerobic ability and volume of training. And then how does that play a role in your development towards that goal? All right? So I go right into the focus of what they've done in training and try to relate it to the concepts of what they might be missing.
I remember a conversation that you've had with me. I think this might have been like 4 or 5 years ago, and it's one that Kafuzi, my co, likes to quote quite often, which is a fun one because it's like it has like a little turn to it. And the point you made to me was like, you weren't talking to me, you're speaking, in general, but you're like, you're not special. And it's like, wow, that was harsh. It's like, no, but the point being like, what's going to work for everybody else is going to work for you too. Like, you're not some special snowflake. Like, the principles of training, 99.9% of it that works for most people are going to work for you. And this was in the conversation of like, who can go sub 3? And your point was like, a lot of people can go sub 3. They just need, either the confidence and the training to do so. How would you break down the OTQ goals in that same context? Obviously, it's not the same amount of people that can go sub 3 can also OTQ, but in your mind, where is that threshold? Just in terms of like either the general population, or not in general population, but like the people who are consistent marathoners or super strong, maybe college runners who are thinking about getting into the marathon.
It's a really, really good question, because my experience with this is, let's find out and not base it off of, I had a conversation with another coach in this realm, and he had said, oh, well, this person's only run this level of marathon before. They're not really relevant. And literally the next day, that athlete went out and ran a 2:22 marathon on the female side. And I'm like, man, you can go fuck yourself. Look at what that person just did. Like, you are not the determining factor of somebody else's ability. You don't know shit. Let's find out. Let's go after it. And again, you're probably going to have to bleep out a lot because I get emotional about this stuff. Like I had an athlete run really well and develop really well. And I was talking to a company about a potential sponsorship, and their response was, well, he's not really relevant. He finished 4th in the world at the World Championships. What do you mean he's not relevant? 2 years later, to the day of receiving that text, he finished 3rd at the Sydney Marathon. Right? On a really hard course, ran 2:06:47. Woo! We've got Julia Patternane, who just finished 3rd at the World Championship for her nation's first global medal in history. It was only her 2nd marathon, going against athletes that are 2:18 and 2:21 and 2:22, and a whole range of athletes that are inside of that. And she came out with a medal. So I don't know. And that's the hardest part about this. When we hosted one of our races for the OTQ in 2023, Flannery Davis Love was a 1:19 half marathoner as a personal best. She set 2 half marathon PRs in our race and qualified for the OTQ in 2023. I mean, there's a picture of her just arms stretched out, muscles, and screaming as she crossed that line, deservedly so. And she put to rest any demons that she might have had that she was not capable, because that's the messaging we get. You must be this tall to ride. And if we're talking about what do you need to have inside of you to qualify for the trials, you better not be basing it off of what other people say, because I promise you, they don't want you to be successful. They want you to have like 85% of the success that you want for yourself. Because if you get to 100, man, all of a sudden they just want to push you down.
Feels very relevant outside of running as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really does.
Look, you could do that, but there's
Yeah.
always this but in the
But it's
conversation.
going to be really hard. Are you sure you want to do that? Or, do you really have the time for that? Do you have that in you? Yeah.
Yeah. And you be careful who you surround yourself by, right? Like, Peter, you were with a bunch. I followed your story, not intensely, but I do remember following your story. And you weren't by yourself. You were with people who were like-minded, who were willing to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think we're so excited about this 2.5-year journey. And we're almost like salespeople. We got a big placard on our chest on the internet, standing on the street corner going, find friends, get out there, get
Yeah.
after it. I mean, the thing I'm curious about is, the elements that people need to surround themselves with. And I was curious how you think about risk and how you think about durability. So much about an athlete's progression is consistency, and it's stacking, and I've had athletes say to me, like, should I run 130 miles a week? Like, I'm all in. I'm willing to do what it takes. I'm willing to, and because those people exist in the larger sphere, I mean, then I don't always know how to answer if someone says, like, I want to run 120 miles a week, other than to say the only way we're going to turn up the heat is 1 degree at a time. So you're going to have to like get there gradually. But like, you have coached enough athletes. There are people who are, I don't want to say they're special, but they're durable as all hell. And my issue with that is always they seem to find out by throwing themselves against the wall, and it just so happens like they didn't break. But I know a lot of people who did break. So how do you think about that? Because the marathon being a somewhat unique distance on the roads, the durability required, there are athletes who fashion themselves through a great deal of risk. So how do you quantify that for athletes or talk them through?
There's a few points inside of that, because all of them kind of relates to, are you eating enough? Are you sleeping enough? Are you hydrating enough? Do you get enough rest to be able to handle that type of volume? What has been your history before? Nathan Martin is a great example. We took some risks with his training leading into the Boston Marathon, and he's already at a professional level. He was 7th at the Olympic Trials. He was 63 seconds away from making the Olympic team, and that was a huge success. It was awesome.
Huge.
And then let's try some things. But what we found out for him as an individual, he wasn't eating enough to support the increase of physical activity. Just because of timing and life, we increased the volume of running, but physically he just wasn't able to eat enough to support that level. And so what we've done now, and why he's running so well now, is actually we've reduced the volume of running to match his ability to eat. Right? And so he's only running 80 or 90 miles a week. And we're going to go out there and we're going to run CIM. When we get good weather, we're going to run 207. We're going to win that national championship. And we're going to do it off of the volume of running that's appropriate for his body and what he has time for. Julia was 3rd at the World Championships off of maybe 90 miles at a peak, mostly 80 to 90. There are women out there that were running 110, 120, 130. But for Julia, it made a lot of sense. Tabello was running 125 for an average of 11 weeks. And that allowed for him to run 3rd at Sydney and run 206. Your question is individualized. It's not, it's about what can you eat to support the activity? How does that activity fit your life with work? We compare, when we're talking about the road to the trials, we're not talking about professional runners who have sponsorships. We're talking about regular people who work full-time, who parent full-time, right? Who have other priorities in their life. It can't always be just about the volume of running. There is inherent risk that you're going to do too much. You're going to burn out. Great, you qualify for the trials, but you don't even get there because you got a stress fracture in your femur. Right? So there is inherent risk with doing too much too soon. And if you're doing too much and not focusing on what I believe are pillars of health, sleep, nutrition, and hydration, then that risk far outweighs the reward of getting there, because you're probably not going to even get on the line, even if you qualify.
That's fascinating. Your different athletes and their different what's working for them. That's great.
Yeah. Personalized concepts matter. There's some, I work with an athlete now who I worked with from a few years ago. And a few years ago, he wasn't ready to recognize that you can't be all in. You can't just focus on this because he was teaching, he wasn't sleeping, he was coaching, he was trying to do everything all at once, and he burned out. And he put himself into a shell, and he wouldn't talk to anybody. And it took him a few years to kind of come out of that. Now he's got a much more level head about him. Now he's got a much more reasonable approach. It's happier and it's joyous, and he's having fun finding out what he's capable of.
I mean, I could talk about the benefits of my training group till like the sun sets, but one of them was the years that have passed have given me appreciation for the social pressure. First and foremost, we weren't big dogging each other racing workouts. So that's the big initial threshold that didn't exist in college, doesn't exist in a lot of training groups that are toxic. Fine. You move past that. I've actually realized over time, the real check was by training together twice a week. There was we almost inadvertently backed into this situation where we would each do our own thing 5 days a week, maybe meet up for some miles, but some guys were in the pool, some guys were running 105 miles a week, some guys would bike a little bit, some guys would take different days off. So that was personalized. And then if you let's say you didn't run a good workout on Saturday. Okay. Let's say you don't then follow it with a mediocre workout on Wednesday. Okay. If by the next Saturday you're not doing all that well, like the guys immediately, it was like a swarm of, honeybees or something. Like, we're rushing to you, like, what's going on? Like, are you sleeping? How's life stress? How are you eating? Because there was a typical balance of guys would be, someone would be leading one day, someone else would be leading another day. And so there was a social pressure to not just, I think I worry about athletes who go off in a cave, they train on their own, and they're like, I have been dog tired for 5 weeks and I am just making it, it's this glorification of the grind to a point of just lack of performance. And so there was a check on that. Like, there was no, people look at Strava and they're just so proud of the art they're making with that graph, as opposed to, is it like making me a stronger, fitter athlete? And I get there's a leap of faith at times. I mean, my buddy who is my training partner / coach, Patrick Reeves, used to say, like, this is the trust fall portion of the block build. Like, there's for a lot of people gearing up towards, let's say, Chicago, they're coming out of it, but there's a period where you don't totally know what it's gonna bake into. But I love the way you're talking about not just looking at one metric and being like, that'll be my hero metric, but making a big picture of it.
Yeah, I think it matters, right? And then we look at like the training itself. Well, this training got me to 240 as a female runner. And so therefore, I'm just going to repeat what I did before, because I went from 245 to 240. And then, now that same exact training got me down to 238.30. You didn't see the exact same bump that you did. And then you repeat that same training again. Now you're 238.10. And you saw just a little bit more. The principle of diminishing returns. I'm not 100% Jack Daniels. We lost a really good coach, really good person in this world just last week. But I am, his VDOT concepts. I speak honestly. I was one of the first to be an online coach outside of the VDOT system to use that system and bring it to a larger group of people. And I've been a part of it for well over 10, 12 years in the online coaching world. And Jack's concepts of principle diminishing returns, when it comes to training philosophy, it matters. You can't just repeat what it is you did in the past and expect the same type of benefit. You can't do it inside of a training segment. You can't just keep doing the same stuff over and over again. And you can't do it for years and years, because the principle of diminishing returns says you're not going to develop the same way. At some point, you might even go backwards. All right. So that's why in my focus and our focus as a business, as a coaching service, is what's missing and how do we reattack what's missing.
James, earlier, I love that you were basically like allergic to the question of like, hey, can I possibly qualify for this? Like basically the idea being, hey, I want some level of certainty before I put in massive effort. Like, you have to guarantee me results before I'm willing to really dive into a years long process. And obviously, as you're talking, it's clear that like, hey, you need to have a certain amount of faith or just curiosity as opposed to certainty. And I think the obvious reaction to that sort of response would be like, okay, fine, then I'm going to go all in. We've used that phrase a couple of times here, and I'm going to really go, I'm going to find out. One thing that you've stood for a long time is the idea of sleep and making sure that people are doing this. And because your entire company caters to amateur runners who have a lot of stuff going on, this is like a great audience for that. So when you're talking to people who are, the people who are potentially going to OTQ, or the people who are really have a lot going on in their life and are trying to get as much running in as they can, what are your conversations around sleep? What are you trying to recommend that people try to get? And how does that change as the mileage or the demands or stresses of life continue to increase?
I use sleep and nutrition in kind of a combined conversation. It's not just sleep. It's not just nutrition. It's how do they work together? Because if you're waking up at 5 a.m. and you're out the door at 5:30, what you eat before that run matters, right? Because you can't have 600 calories right before you do a 5:30 a.m. hard speed session. You're probably going to have a bad day. So when I'm talking about sleep, I'm also talking about nutrition intake and how they play a role together. I just had a nutrition call with my athletes last night to kind of dive into my personal thoughts and experience with what I believe will help everybody, regardless of level of ability, get better. But when it comes to sleep itself, I try to recommend that if they're only getting 5 hours of sleep, let's try to get 6 or 7. If they're only getting 6 or 7, let's try to get just a little bit more. I'm not saying that you need to sleep 10 hours a day. I don't think that's feasible for the vast majority of people. But if you can go to bed at a reasonable time and not feel like you're waking up every morning, got to hit that alarm and hit snooze, like you should be waking up with a fair amount of energy. You should be going to bed when your body's telling you it's time to sleep. And to me, I think that's probably 8-9 hours a night. I think at the minimum, it's probably like 7.5. But if an athlete's coming to me and they're only getting 5 hours of sleep, we probably are overtraining. We're probably not eating enough to manage that type of work, because our body does weird things when it's underfueled, and our body does really weird things when it's overtrained. So how do we manage that?
There's a sleep specialist whose book is really good, and he's done the podcast circuit, Matthew Walker, and he's done like a ton of sleep studies and all of that. He's like, his book is fantastic. I'd recommend anyone reading it or listen to a podcast he's done, and he'll chop it up in like 90 minutes and you'll get the joke. But ultimately, his point is there is a very small segment of the population that can get by on 4 to 5 hours of sleep. It's a genetic thing. He's like 50% of the people that he talks to thinks they're in that subsection. He goes, but if you rounded to the nearest number, the amount of people who are in that subsection is 0%, because it's like 0.002% of people can do it. So he's like half the people, it's almost like people think they're good drivers. Like 50, I think it's like 90% of people think they're above average. It's like, that's not really how average works. But The same thing with sleep is like, you think you can get away with 5 because some people can, but the fact of the matter is that you probably can't. And almost he's willing to bet any amount of money that anyone he's talking to is not in that subsection.
Who's trying to get away with 5 hours of sleep? Why do you want that for your life?
I don't think it's about trying to get away with it out of choice. I think it's trying to get away with it out of what they feel is necessity.
Want to do it all.
They want to do it all. They feel like they have to do it all. They feel like if they don't do it all and they're not 100% successful in all areas of their life, that they're failures. And that's a hard emotional capacity to carry with you on a daily basis. I have to be the perfect parent. I've got to be the perfect worker. I've got to be the perfect athlete. I've got to be the perfect person on social media and share the best parts of my world as if that's how my life is. And it's just not true. Like, everybody's life is garbage. Everybody's life is great. There's aspects that are wonderful and beautiful. There's aspects that are really challenging. And yet we live in this world now, I think more now than ever, where we feel this immense pressure, this social pressure that Peter, that you were talking about or to elaborate on what you were talking about, of perfection, being optimized.
You're talking about sleep reminded me of Nick Simmons has made a lot of YouTube videos over the year, but he made one video one time that he said, a lot of his athletic success, he believes, came from the fact that he never owned an alarm clock. And I was like, oh, that's stone cold, because, he was a pro runner, and he was, for all his like bloviating and like larger than life, he was also a science major, and he just would go to bed in a manner that would allow him to wake up for practice with OTC, without, wake up naturally. And man, oh man, that's so simple, and it doesn't work for everyone's life. But I mean, imagine what if all in meant going to bed earlier and being at peace with that, not being.
He also didn't have a clock
bitter.
for the first lap of his 800 meters because he was always about 10 meters back from the.
Yeah, the clock would turn off after,
Oh man,
No, it's true though. Like Kim Conley is the same way. Kim, from conversations I've had with her in the past, and one of the things that allowed her to become an Olympian multiple times over was that she wakes up when her body says it's time to wake up. She gets the sleep she needs. But at the time, when you are like, we hear these things for professional runners, and like you just said, that's less than 0.01% of the population, right?
Sure.
So like, how do we negotiate training as a full-time teacher, mother of 2 or 3, parenting, marriage, maybe not marriage, and still having those responsibilities, and you don't have any help at home, male or female, and then also going after this monstrous, amazing goal of qualifying for the trials. I've got some athletes, one in particular, Lauren Ames. She's runs for the BAA. She's 2:40 in the marathon. She's going to be running our race in March. Teacher, athletic director, parenting, marriage, and we focus, because of the limited time that she has, we focus her running on time, not distance. Let's get the morning runs in by time, and let's see what we can do. I don't know if we're going to run 2:36:59, but I know that she's going to develop. She has. She was the 11th American in Boston 2 Bostons ago, which is really cool. Yeah, I think even if folks aren't successful towards their goal, if they're defining success as 2:15:59 or 2:36:59. Okay, you ran 2:16:02. You ran 2:19:01. Right? The idea of success isn't defined by that simple moment. There's so many concepts. Even for what you accomplished at CIM, Peter, I was there, man. I was at that finish line. And it was this collective sigh of, and then there was this collective applause for the effort and development.
Thank you. It was pretty special, and also the reality is, the more time that passes, the more I'm able to realize like what a crazy man I was during those years, and how fortunate I was, and how these things exist in, I think, the simpler, the better. I mean, I was obsessing all the details, but I was just in a moment in time where it was all flowing quite naturally, and it wasn't just a turn of the screw so hard. I mean, I look at, just to run the volume for a second, I look at people's training at how much volume they're putting in. I'm like, well, that's cool. That's cool for 7 days. I used to do that in 6, because like a day off a week is somewhat arbitrary, but at the same time, it was sustainable. I would just churn out these weeks. I mean, I had a buddy once text me, and he's like, oh, this is rude. And it was like 99.9 miles in 6 days. And because I'm not very type A. And so I was like, oh yeah, man, like the big flex is that I'm not running today. That was what made me I feel like able to stay in that zone for as long as I was. And so, coming out of it, I was like, oh, wow. You can't always appreciate it until you have a chance to step back. But I'm excited for these people to find a way to stay. I think it'll be interesting at the end of this project to look at oh wow, who really stayed in that zone for the duration of it, and how far did they make it versus, who was in, and then but the next 2.5 years are enough time that people could kind of be injured and come back, or they could become disillusioned. I thought she was done. And you're like, oh no, she's back for, the CIM build in 2027. That's in
Yeah.
2 years. So,
Yeah. And the window should go through, because the Olympic trials is set on specific days, March 25th and 26th of 2028. And so that means that includes Houston in 2028, because we have a 60-day concept, right? So CIM is not the last qualifier.
Beautiful.
Houston's the last qualifier, or that weekend. Right?
Breaking news. We have to redo our intro episode. We said the last day was going to be a CIM.
No, this is great. Oh man.
Yeah, you find these little tidbits, right? But that being said, listen, I hope I didn't speak out of turn. I'm fairly confident. I'm like 99.5% confident that is actually accurate. Now that you just said that, like maybe I misread that, but I'm fairly certain that the Olympic trials are 25th and 26th of March, and that there's a 60-day window leading to it. Right.
You know what? I just want to celebrate one thing. I think we met at Houston 2020, and I'm writing a whole book about this experience. But by the time
our meeting,
yes, exactly.
An entire chapter dedicated to you.
Just imagine the book proposal. There was a day. There was a morning.
Saw this weird guy sitting in an Irish cap and spandex shorts in the lobby at 3:30 in the morning. I had to talk to him.
Some moments send your life in a whole new direction. Amazing. But I really did reach a point where I knew how good I was because of having done the running. And then I also, how do I say this? Like the insecurity that I think a lot of runners feel started to fall away from me, just be out of sort of repetition and boredom, such that I remember standing in the lobby and talking to your different athletes. And, there are elements of those days in the book, obviously, where I'm talking to pro runners, and I just felt like I had so much appreciation for them, but I also wasn't I didn't feel less than. I just felt like, oh, we're peers in this space. I've been in this space. I have so much appreciation for what you can do. And for better and worse, my name had become synonymous with like, oh. So I had amazing conversations with different people. I remember in that lobby about like, oh, what are they going to do about this, or, that strategy, and then wishing them well for the trials. But in a great way, I just felt like I belonged in that space, and they were more than here for it. They're like, cool, like let's chat, let's talk about it. And so that's what I would encourage for people is, don't approach this journey as I'm on the outside hoping to be one of you. Like if you're doing this, you are one of us, like you are one of the people on the journey, and take benefit from that, feel like you're part of the momentum of this whole build. Don't feel like, oh, maybe someday if I run a certain time, someone will think I'm good enough that they'll like acknowledge me. It's a fairly open and welcoming community in that regard.
Yeah, it is when you're with the right people. There's still kind of to the point that I was talking about before. There's still those, just be wary of those people that are truly like, you got to be this tall to ride, man. Fuck that. Like that shit pisses me off. Cause they're making a judgment about your capability based off of what you've done, not what you can become. And there's some really good people out there that are supportive, that will believe in you. Just be mindful of the ones that you're surrounding yourself with that are always on the negative, and because it's really easy to absorb that into yourself as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, look for it and identify it, because I love I think I've talked on Relay about this. I love people who like big dog the marathon, or like act too big for their britches, because they're inevitably setting themselves up for a kind of embarrassment. And you're like, oh, watch out over there. Like, you think you're the coolest thing since sliced bread because you ran 2:35. It's going to be awkward when you meet all of my friends who've broken to 2:30, or our friends who are 2:23 marathoners who are just the most inclusive and welcoming. So like, I get it. And yet people,
that's an interesting point too, is because, man, I sat with a college kid just the other day, and he's 19 or 20 years old. I think he's 19. And he was just talking about breaking 16. Like that's his mission in the 5K on the track. And if he does that, he gets to be on the team where he goes. I think it might be a D2 type of school. And so like that's their barrier for entry. And like, man, that kid was just pumped. And I was pumped for him because he had the vision for himself of what he wanted to accomplish. And it was just, I don't know. I feel like the OTQ to me right now is the same conversation that I'm having with athletes that are for the BQ, and the same conversation for the athletes that I'm having for the eventually announced Olympic standard, and the same conversations I'm having for those who are trying to break four. It's just not how many conversations am I having, but the substance of the conversation is very similar. It's very similar because there are plenty of great runners who are qualifying for the Olympic trials who are never going to be Olympians. Right. And plenty of BQ athletes out there. That's their whole purpose of training. It's the same conversation. It's just how many people are getting to that level.
James, I do want to ask you about the social media part of this, because for a lot of people, their running community is online, either because their hours don't, preclude them from meeting with people during the day, or just maybe they live in a place where there's a running group that maybe doesn't work for them or whatever. With that said, you built your back on like social media, right? Like in the early days of McKirdy Trained, you guys really did a great job with Instagram and expanding your social, your coaching platform. We're seeing a lot with YouTube now in terms of the running world. People want to document it, and I think it's great, and I love to watch it. But at the same time, there are drawbacks as well. So what have you seen, or what advice do you give to people who not only are working hard in their training, but also are trying to share the journey and doing so like with an open heart, and they're not trying to gain necessarily anything out of it, or like they don't have like ulterior motives behind the sharing. Like they just really like social media, or they like video, and they want to share the journey. I know that your company has dealt with a lot of people who've done similar things. So what's your advice to people who are kind of in that realm of sharing and making sure that they're doing it in a sustainable way?
When you share a lot on social media, the whispers in the background sometimes become very loud conversations that you may or may not want to be a part of. So I encourage you that if you're sharing on YouTube, you're sharing on TikTok, you're sharing on Instagram or other modes of social media, that you also understand that you are opening yourself up to a criticism that may not be warranted, often is not warranted. And you don't have a responsibility to anybody to continue to share if you get to a point where you say, I don't feel good about this anymore. You have no responsibility at all to anybody else except continuing your process and what it is you're trying to accomplish, and to the people that love you and care about you. I think it's really easy to, I don't want to disappoint my followers. They don't know you from a hole in the wall. They don't know you at all. They know you for the snippets that you're sharing. They don't know you as a person. And it could be very easy to start equating your self-worth. I know I've made that mistake in the past myself, from coaching and athletically. It's very easy to equate your self-worth with what it is you're sharing on social media, or what it is you're trying to, I don't know, spread the word of. And it's just not true.
All right, I want to take a quick break to talk about our sponsor for today's episode, V.O2. Unlock your potential with V.O2, the cutting-edge coaching app built on the proven science of legendary exercise physiologist Dr. Jack Daniels. With the built-in paces, coaches and athletes can rely on V.O2 to train more accurately, improve their performance, and significantly reduce injuries. That's been the case for me as an athlete and a coach for years. Team coaches, private coaches, and large organizations have all used this app successfully over the years. It's based on science and is proven out by athletes over and over and over again. And you get the individualized training interdependency within the app. Learn more at v.o2.com today. You can also download the app in the app stores. You can check the links in our show notes. And if you use code ROAD to the trials, all spelled out, you can save 20% as well. So let's get back to our conversation. Odd part for a lot of people is that as they amp up the miles, that also necessitates more mobility and strength to deal with the mileage. But the catch-22 is, by amping up the mileage means they have less time to do said mobility and strength. So how do you walk people through that process? And we should say that you were you basically worked in strength and conditioning before you even got into running. So this was your original background in the coaching realm.
I believe that strength and mobility is a key aspect in development, but it is not the prerequisite for development and growth in this sport. If adding strength doesn't take away from your ability to sleep, if adding strength doesn't take away your ability to eat, if it augments the idea of your development in running, then great, add it in. But if I have an athlete who's pressed for time, I'd rather them foam roll and do some mobility exercises for 5 to 10 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days a week, than try to get in all of this excess, because I want to reduce the risk of overtraining. Because strength training is training, so is running. The primary focus of running in development in the OTQ is running. Maybe, though, you can get away with doing less volume of running and strengthening. Maybe you don't need to run 120 miles a week. Maybe you can get away with running 90. We're proving that it can happen for quite a few people on an even higher stage of performance. And they still have time to lift and do mobility. So there is this balance of, well, if you're running 60 miles a week and you want to OTQ, yeah, we probably need to increase that a little bit for most people. Maybe some can get there. I had an athlete OTQ in 2020. She ran 3 long runs, and her longest run was 15 miles. She was of the ability to get the OTQ. Like that's just who she was. That was not the case for Giles Goodwin, who took 4 years to go from 305 to 244.34. Right? It took her a long time to be able to do that, a lot of development to be able to do that. But to kind of get back to that point of how do you fit it all in? Focus on what is the most important: sleep, nutrition, running, running appropriately. And if that means there's a little bit of shifting of the scales because you are generally weak in certain areas of your body, well, yeah, let's pay attention to those weaknesses. Let's develop them, and then let's augment that along the way.
I think the last piece we can wrap the conversation up with is the mental piece, the mental stamina that comes with, like the person you just mentioned who it took 4 years to go from 305 to 244. Both that mental stamina and then the mental stamina it takes to like dig at the end of a marathon and accomplish that goal when you might be seconds away from making making the goal.
Yeah. A lot of things have to go right. I don't think you need to take a swing in every season of your training to try to get the OTQ. I think you take a swing, you figure out where you're at, and then it might be appropriate to take another swing the next season, but it might be appropriate to take a step back so it doesn't become bigger than it needs to be. Giles ran the Boston Marathon maybe a year before CIM in 2019, and she ran it for fun and ran 3:30. She just had a blast. It wasn't even, she didn't go out there to run as hard as possible. We took the season away from marathoning. She was fit enough to run the marathon safely, but like, let's just have fun. And then let's go back at it and let's just find out. Her email was just a few weeks after CIM in 2016. And she said her pipe dream was to qualify. That was her pipe dream. And we got there eventually, not because we were hyper focused on the OTQ. She was a 3:05 marathoner. How do we break 3? How do we then run a little faster? 3:05, 2:57, 2:52, 3:30 for fun, and then 2:44, right? And we took seasons in there. The mental side of it, though, I think we can get. So we saw this in the Berlin Marathon. I was talking about this with one of my athletes this morning. At the halfway point on the men's side, at a truly elite level, there were 17 men sub 2:06 pace. There were 30 men sub 2:08 pace. They weren't paying attention to the weather. They were just quote unquote racing each other and stuck in. I tweeted this. If you are stuck in the herd of sheep, you don't know where the edge of the cliff is. 17 men at sub 2:06 pace. Only one man ran sub 2:06 in Berlin. 30 men, sub 208, only 7 men ran sub 208. They could have had a much better performance, placement-wise, contract-wise, if they paid attention to the weather. There is a little bit of risk. What if that last chance is a bad weather day? You just kind of have to go for it and accept the consequences, right? Like, that's okay, right? And maybe some of those men and some of those women in the race as well in Berlin made those decisions because, right, might as well just go for it. I trained all for my entire season for this. Let's do it. But you don't have to, you can take those incremental steps along the way as well. I think that's why it was really cool to see what Nick Hager did, run 2:11 and change, and what Mulder did as well, to run 2:15, because they still got it even in really bad conditions. But you don't have to ride the line and suffer. You in a really bad weather day. You want to give yourself a chance to have a great final 10K, a great final 5K. You want to give yourself a chance to have that portion of your race be the most powerful in here. Don't give away your race in the first 10K. CIM is known as the OTQ factory. They'll have 175 people on pace through the first 10K, through the first half, and then maybe they'll have 40 qualifiers. Is it the OTQ factory, or is it because they had 175 people on pace, male or female, right? Like, quantity will sometimes bring the numbers, and CIM's wonderful. They do an amazing job. I love Danielle and what she's done with the elite program, but like, it doesn't have to be a war of attrition either. It's the same percentage of people, but what if that percentage could be higher if they weren't running in the pack and they just ran what they were supposed to be able to run? If they were patient. If they didn't just try to go out at goal pace, because oftentimes the pacers will go out way too fast anyway. They make the mistake of running the first 5K 30 seconds too fast or 20 seconds too fast, and they throw away their race because they were stuck in what everybody else was doing. You want to have the best chance of having mental strength. Learn what it means to be pacing appropriately and taking nutrition in training. You're already doing it by yourself. You don't need a pack of people inside of a race to get it done. You don't need it. You are strong enough and more capable. That's what your training has taught you, is that you're ready to do it on your own. You don't need anybody else to find success. You can do it. It's nice when there's people there, but what happens when everybody else runs a stupid race? Are you just going to follow on them because that's what the pack did? I don't prescribe to that, and it's I do believe that it is why we find tremendous success in the marathon distance.
I want to pivot off that though briefly, where you alluded to this earlier, this idea of marathon season after marathon season, and now with the rise of super shoes, you see it even more and more. Maybe I'll run Berlin and then I'll try to run, maybe if not Chicago, then CIM, or come back and coming back. But I have a sense from the things you've said that you sell your athletes on, how do you glorify the shorter distances and the benefits, mental and physical, that can be gained in developing speed and going after those other PRs, when we live in a world where people if it's not the marathon, I don't know if it's my friends are going to care, or it doesn't sound as worthy of my time and attention. How do you coach like that?
That's a really, really good question. I could only do it based off of the experiences that we've seen. And in the last year, we've had 15 top 10 performances at major efforts and major global marathons. We've had 12 of those top 15 performances on that stage be top 5. We've podiumed. We've done it by not focusing on the marathon solely, and we've done it by focusing on development and growth of athletes, right? How do we get success? Focus on development and growth of yourself as an athlete. Have confidence and faith that your growth and development will turn into and weave seamlessly into your marathon development. A segment of marathoning could be as little as 6 weeks and maybe 11. There's a lot more weeks that lead into that. We could be focusing on other things, but if you do marathon after marathon after marathon, how do you really recover? And then how do you really develop those other missing aspects? Now, maybe Berlin was a colossal nightmare and it was a failure and you didn't even finish. And maybe you really were ready, and maybe it was just a physiological misstep. Maybe it was a really cold weather day like Boston in 2018 when Kellen had hypothermia, Kellen Taylor of NAZ Elite at the time, and she came back and bounced back and ran 2:24 in Grandma's in the same season. That's not the same thing as giving the marathon your 100% and finishing it to the maximum of your ability, and then thinking, well, okay, well, now like 10 weeks later, I'm going to go do the exact same thing.
I mean, I don't know if we're part of the problem. We're talking about road to the trials and like the marathons. We're going to celebrate all the majors, all the ones where people are chasing. And I want people to know that, yeah, there is a lot of development to be gained by finding friends, finding competitors, and going after your 5K PR with all your might. I mean, I've met a lot of people who are like, I can just never seem to, run a half marathon as fast during a half marathon build or than I can during the marathon build. And you're like, well, that's because you are actually focused during that marathon build. Like you're actually dialed in all the things. And during your half marathon build, you're like, well, maybe I also, go out more and, maybe skip some strength training. And you're like, okay.
The principles of healthy living and healthy development shouldn't change. And they, if regardless of the distance you're running for, whether it be a 5K, 10K on the roads, or whether it be a marathon, or whether it be an ultramarathon, the principles of healthy living and good decision making they hold true. We don't see Olympic level. We just had the World Championships, and and everybody's focused on it. Grant Fisher, Nico Young, Nikki Hiltz, and the best American athletes of all time. It's not like they're not focusing on healthy living just because they're only running a 5K or a 1,500 meter.
Wait, speaking of half marathons, I want you to speak to. We haven't even touched on that. Years ago, many of us were looking around going like, there just needs to be cold weather races that are run on close courses that have bottle service, and only one person I know really went about doing anything about that, and that's you. Can you talk about some of your race series and particularly like some of the half marathon stuff, but also the marathon stuff you've been putting on?
So we actually haven't hosted the half marathon.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, the same park maybe.
The Trials of Miles business. Yes. Cooper and Dave Alfano have put on amazing events in the half marathon over on the same course as we've hosted our marathons. And they've done a great job. And once that window opens, I anticipate that they're gonna have amazing half marathon events to qualify for the Olympic trials. And I anticipate that I'll be sending a few of my athletes out there, if not to pace and help serve the race, but also to compete and try to qualify themselves as well. Now, to qualify for the Olympic trials in a half marathon, you got to be almost Olympic A material. Like you almost have to be able to run 2:13. You almost have to be able to run 2:29 because the half marathon standard is 72 flat or faster. For the women, and for the men, it's 63 minutes or faster. So the amount of men that qualified in the half marathon is in 2024, I think was 8. Right. And those athletes didn't run a marathon. And I think for the women, it was like 11. And those athletes didn't run or maybe 12. And those athletes didn't run a marathon prior. So some of them were debuts, like Fiona O'Keefe, who won the marathon trials, right? Became an Olympian because of her half marathon. So it's possible, but you do have to be another step above.
So I messed that up, but I'm curious, like how what you've learned from putting on these elite level, like controlled, almost lab type races where people are, following a tangent line, and the videos out of those races. I haven't been able to attend one. I'm hoping to. Have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think for every level of run, listen, October 12th, the same day as Chicago, we're hosting a race called Breaking 4 in Michigan for 4-hour marathoners. It's the same principles. If you have nutritional support, fluid support that's appropriate, if you can run on a straight line, like, listen, you have this opportunity to run Boston, but you're not getting bottle support. You have this opportunity to run some of these other races, but you have no bottle support, and you're not going to run the tangents of the race. Why would you choose that race for your OTQ when you have like gold sitting at your doorstep? All you got to do is open the door and take advantage of it. Nutritional support, tangent line, hopefully good weather, and an actually fast course, and safe in case it doesn't go well. You can step off. You're only a mile away from your car. You can save your season and regroup and understand what it is you need to do, right? So our races, especially on the Olympic trials concept, are focused on providing every level of runner has the same exact opportunity. It's like a mini Olympic trials. Right? Every single runner has bottle support. We got the idea from the Marathon Project in 2020 that was meant to cater to basically the cream of the crop. Well, how do we extrapolate that and build it for regular people? I had 2 marathoners who were being told in that race, like, hey, sorry, you're not good enough because of the nature of the event, right? There was limited capacity. They couldn't handle everybody that wanted to race. They could only take a certain amount of people. Now they've expanded their window and they've become another valid option for participation for the OTQ. They're going to have OTQ pace groups and all this kind of stuff. Everybody's getting the exact same treatment, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Our race in 2023 produced more OTQ efforts than any other race in 2023, which was awesome. We had more than Chicago. We had more than Grandma's. We had more than CIM or equal to CIM. It was a lot of fun to help everybody get there.
For sure. So if people are interested in that race in March or their upcoming Breaking 4 or any other races that McKirdy Trained is putting on, where should they go?
They can actually go right to the website. We have a little tab that you can select what events. Breaking 4 is still open. We still have some space there. But Breaking 3 is a race that is actually, it's still OTQ eligible, even though it's meant for runners who are trying to break 3. It's not meant for an OTQ on the men's side specifically, because you start to lap those 3 hour and 15-minute runners a few times, and that could be a little bit dangerous. But a woman could go out there, certainly run 2:35, because there will be. We had a man run 2:27:04. Win that race this past March, and he was a 3:04 marathoner. He set a 37-minute PR. So there are plenty of opportunities in that race to qualify, and the micro OTQ, where that's the race its purpose. You can go right to the website, log on, register, and get the elite level care that you need to qualify.
So McKirdyTrained.com. James, I'm sure we'll have you on again, that's for sure, and we're hoping to get out there to your race this coming spring. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I hope this was a good episode for all the listeners.
Well, so much gold. Thank you.